Is there ever a point at which you say, well, we're not going to train and educate in this particular area? So if one takes that risk-based approach to a logical conclusion, it seems like if we exclude the regulators and if we exclude the government for a moment, it would seem as though from a business perspective, you would genuinely find certain areas where it doesn't make sense to train these people on this particular risk area. But then if we do include the regulators and the government, it's almost like you would be loath to do nothing in a certain area because you don't ever want to be perceived as doing nothing, even though the risk assessment may come back and say, this population really isn't at risk. We keep using the example of being able to bribe anyone. They're just not in a position to do it. How do you balance that? Using that risk-based approach with at least getting coverage across the board, despite low risk, still doing something. Or do you find areas where indeed you do nothing? It's like, oh no, you literally don't need to train them in these particular areas.
Well, I think that's also, speaking to the fact that you need, more of that detailed view of your employee base to be able to do that. You need to understand who's doing what job and what potential it has to influence or not influence, in those particular areas. So when I think about, the different strategies that organizations have employed, we have clients that think, very, sort of advanced in nature and think about the fact that, even though from a risk-based standpoint, there's less need within a certain target population of employees, they may still do sort of the bare minimum, right? Sort of the check the box, hey, at least I gave them some awareness, I did something, right? So you can't say I didn't do anything. And I think, that's still a very valid approach of making sure that you've at least, had I'll call it a foundational approach, for that broad base, right? But then when you really understand that, this set of employees, whether it's because of the level of organization, the access to systems that they have, the country that they might operate in, whatever those, sort of parameters are, when you factor those in and you say, well, specifically these 46 employees, need extensive, training. It may be a combination of, classroom training, of, sort of reminders every month, different programs that might go to them, where you say, I know I have a high risk there, and so I'm going to put in a lot more effort there, but it doesn't mean you completely ignore other segments. So I think, striking that balance of making sure that you've at least built a foundation, sort of enterprise-wide, but really understand, what are those risk groups, and how do you target those risk groups, and how to utilize your resources to target them, I think is just extremely important in sort of thinking about the design of your education program.